And thank you all for coming and sharing with us.
Good evening. Thank you.
I'll start off with you, District Attorney Johnson, as always. When you look at this, we see the faces. But I think when you look at Arlene's story, I think it can be summarized best that not only is an individual killed, but families are actually killed behind this. And it seems as though the numbers continue to rise, particularly here in our borough.
Well, the numbers are not rising, but the problem is severe. This is something that's concerned me for the 21 years that I've been in office, and during that time, I've had to meet with a number of these families and hear a number of these stories. I want to send my condolences to those who lost their loved ones. I want to express my concern and good wishes and hope for a speedy recovery for Veda Vasquez. And I want to thank the borough president and those who spoke out about this, because this is a problem that needs speaking out about. The murder rate is down still this year. It's been going down since about 1990. The shooting incidents are down about 2% this year from last year. We've been heading in the right direction, but as you can see, when you have incidents as dramatic as these, Aisha Santiago, Sadie Mitchell, Felix Del Valle, Veda Vasquez, these are innocent people. These are not even people involved in a dispute. We don't want people involved in disputes getting hurt,
right?
Let alone the people who are just standing around. So we have a lot of work to do.
And Andy, when you see this, I mean, obviously, you know that youth are involved. We're seeing young people become highly involved. And like the district attorney said, this is something that people have been worried about for years. Right. But yet and still, when a youth is involved, it's always at the forefront. What goes through your mind when you start to see these incidents and then you start to see, 16-year-olds involved as a shooter, 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 23-year-olds? I mean, these are people who are just really, should be just hitting the prime of education and life.
Well, you hit the nail on the head when we talk about the failure of our youth in this community. I believe, you've heard me say before, we as adults have failed our kids. Raising a young person doesn't start when they're 16. Raising a young person in the value system starts when they're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So by the time they're changing to the society, when they turn into their teenagers with teen issues, they should be able to navigate because they have a value system in place. But our young people are lost these days. And any solutions that we come up with, and I applaud Ruben and everyone who is speaking out against it, but we need more action to engage our young people to take an action to correct the behavior that's going on. The events of the 60s and the marches and all that was great for that era, but we need really a proactive approach to involving our young people to do something different to get different results, allowing them to be a part of the solutions as opposed to us as adults always having a conversation but not allowing them to engage in an activity that will change the behavior.
Well, we got a young person here, Jestine Meggett. We want to thank you for coming and sharing with us and being here and the positive things that you're doing as well. You hear about what your peers say. What your peers are doing, actually. What are your thoughts about just hearing people in your age group being involved in such violent behavior?
Well, I believe that our youth, we're misleaded. We're not always understood. I can't right the wrong for gang violence because sometimes it's a lack of recreation centers. Most of our young black African-American boys, they want to become rappers or basketball players. And instead of them being these athletes or these music stars, they need to learn how they're not going to get in life during this. They're not going to get through life with this. So our city officials, unfortunately, they need to cut off checks to make recreation centers to make our children want to be interested in entrepreneurship or being a lawyer of some sort, because there are recreation centers, but they fulfill the needs of becoming a basketball player or a rapper.
So you're saying more things other than just the status quo of what we normally see, the athletics, but really dealing with day-to-day issues and dealing with life. District Attorney Johnson, I know that you can only share but so much, but when you hear these young people and you hear the stories of those who are involved, what speaks out from their perspective? I mean, we don't get to hear the mindset or the thoughts of
You mean the actual people perpetrating the violence?
The perpetrators.
The only thing I can say is that my understanding is that people of that age sometimes don't have the maturity and judgment. But this is so basic. I mean, it seems like it should be so simple to understand. A gun, when you pull the trigger and you fire it, it's going to kill who's ever in the path of that bullet. And that's something that needs to be stopped. They need to stop and reflect on. We've tried to intervene before they come to our system. We have a program for 5th and 6th graders that's an anti-violence program, Students Together Avoiding Risk, the STAR program. We've supported a program called EARS, Effective Alternative Resolution Services, in which they teach young people how to be the people to speak to young people so that they can be the intermediaries. They can mediate disputes and talk about how to resolve disputes without resorting to violence. I think we have to reach them at that level. Jestine makes a valid point when she talks about centers only having athletics and rapping, but I see also athletics and rapping as a way to reach young people. So I think we need to do both. We need to draw them in with that and then say, well, if you want to continue to be a part of this, you have to toe the line in certain ways. You have to get certain grades. You have to conduct yourself in a certain way. You have to respect your peers. In particular, young men and young women. The young men need to learn how to respect these young women. We have a program that we've gone into some of the middle schools where we're talking about domestic violence and trying to teach that kind of respect.
I want to talk to you, Andy, for a second, because when you talk about programs, we know the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program is one that's been, highly talked about and highly touted. The thing that always sticks out in my mind is exposure. To have young people to have the ability to share with the Bronx District Attorney or to share with other people. We know that's something that your program consistently has done. How much does exposure play a part in shaping the minds of our young people today?
It plays a tremendous part. We've had conversations about exposing our young people to things outside of the norm. They have to see the world outside of the small box that they can find in. We've had a number of youth who have come through our program, and as I've been doing youth development, who've never seen the outside of a Gun Hill Projects, who haven't seen the outside of Eden Wall houses. So if they haven't been exposed to the world outside of their little box, how would they know how to deal or act appropriately outside of that? So when we talk about exposure, we're giving them exposure not only to different geographical areas by taking them to Albany or Washington, D.C., or just the different parts of the city where there's a museum, but also exposing them to individuals who can give their experience and their inspiration to allow them to know that there's other things better than what they're living in existence right now.
I want to take a look. In January 2009, there was a shooting. 17-year-old teen shot in the face at a party in Brooklyn just months before she was to graduate from Nazareth Regional High School. Just think, when you hear a story like that and you look at yourself in school, what makes the difference for you, I would say? Because you have the same opportunities to make positive and negative choices. What has helped you to make the positive choices that you've made to be who you are today?
The Bronx Youth Empowerment, I believe, makes me know the right from wrong. It helps me build myself into what I would be when I grow up. Even though I'm a resident of Eden Wall houses and I experience a lot of stuff, I try not to follow into their footsteps because they're just thinking short term. You have to think long term when you do this stuff. They think, oh, this is all fun and games, and oh, you're doing this because of this person and you're sticking up for this person. Well, guess what? When you go to jail, nobody's going to stick up for you. You're by yourself. So in order for you to maintain yourself, you have to make sure that you're on the right path. And the Bronx Youth Empowerment helps you build body, mind, and community. So by joining it, I believe that I'm a better person.
District Attorney, short-term, long-term sticks out in my mind. When you talk to some of these people who actually perpetrate crimes, they already have in their mind what's the worst that can happen. They've already meted out what the short term is actually going to be, particularly if I'm a young person. But we know nowadays, if you're a young person and you're engaging in criminal acts, that short term can actually turn into long term.
It can. Even for the people that we see in the youngest end of what we see in adult court, and adults are considered 16 years old and up, although 16, 17, and 18 sometimes, not in some less violent crimes, have opportunities to be treated as youthful offenders. But 13, 14, and 15-year-olds now can be prosecuted in adult court. And for murder, even though the minimum may be less, the maximum is still life for someone of that age. So you're talking about something that even if it doesn't keep you in prison for the rest of your life, is going to keep you responding to the system as a parolee, perhaps, for the rest of your life. So these are life-altering decisions, and the sentences may be somewhat less, but there's still significant jail sentences that can be meted out.
Want to come back and talk a little bit more with our panel as we talk about, youth violence were sparked by a day of outrage right here in the borough of the Bronx, led by Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. We're now talking about some of the alternatives. So stay with us right here on Perspective.